Welcome to the Boaters Podcast. Today we're hanging out with Chris from Ohio with Boat Busters on YouTube. You can check him out over on his channel. And to kick off the show, Chris, we want to know a story about you. One, what was your first boat? And two, what was your worst experience with that boat?
That's a great question. So my first boat actually was a 12-foot, just little standard aluminum fishing boat, pond boat. Can't have more than 10 horsepower on it. I wouldn't say I had any problems with that one though. My second boat, however, was a 16-foot aluminum Starcraft Super Sport with a
Oh.
Johnson 65 horsepower two stroke on the back. And that one gave me a ton of issues. Most notably, probably, you get a big boat that you can have friends on for the first time, and you're excited to show it off, take your buddies
Mm-hmm.
for a ride. And this particular boat ran great in the driveway, like hooked up to some muffs, on the hose and stuff like that. But when I took it out into the lake with all my friends on it, it didn't want to run, had a ton of trouble starting. We'd be out there just floating away while I'm trying to get this thing started.
Oh,
All my
no.
friends are like, this is the worst day ever. So that's where I learned the differences of water pressure and the effects that it can have on an engine. So and that's also where I learned not to take any friends or loved ones on the maiden voyage on a new boat. A new boat.
Yeah, yeah. And not to untie it before you got the engine running.
That's right. Yeah, that's a good
That's
call too.
That's totally funny. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, I think a lot of us have that. I mean, it's good though that you on the first boat you didn't have a whole lot of troubles, but once you got the Johnson and then we're actually
Yeah.
able to take people out, that it's kind of like, oh, now I got all these problems and I can't enjoy because like I want to hang out with my
Exactly.
friends, but like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You finally get some room for some friends, but I guess with bigger boats come bigger problems, right?
that's cool. So you're all about like, you do a lot of like boat flips and stuff like that. So you're going out like looking for a boat, getting it, cleaning it up, and all that kind of stuff. What advice would you give to someone to get into boat flipping? Like, what would you say would be a good thing to do to get into that kind of thing? Hey there, sorry to take you away from the video, but real quick, did you know that on average a boat owner will spend between $1,000 and $5,000 a year just on servicing their engine? And you could actually pocket and save a lot of that money if you would just do the service yourself. It might seem like a daunting task, but I guarantee you virtually everyone can do it with our guidance and the Boaters program. This is just one skill that you could learn inside the program because we have hundreds of other videos teaching you all kinds of boating skills, as well as a weekly live stream where we have questions and answers with me, as well as a chat feature where you can send videos and pictures, ask all kinds of questions, or look for some advice or some guidance on a project that you're doing on your boat. You can join the program by hitting the first link in the description, clicking join, or visiting bornagainboating.com. Now back to the video.
Yeah, that's a great question. Especially like on a limited budget or, things like that that most first boat flipper buyers have. I actually would recommend to start off by just flipping an outboard. So like a
Ooh.
6 horsepower 9.9, maybe a 15. I've got some documented on the channel and others that I've just done, way long before YouTube. $100 to $500, right? That's like something super common that you can do with just flipping an outboard. So, I would say limited budget, find a way to scrape up $100. There's a lot of places you can find broken old outboards that you can fix up for $100 and usually get a few hundred out of them. Work your way around the basics of learning outboards, and then you can move up into John boats and some bow riders and things like that from there. But yeah, I'd say that'd be the biggest tip would be start on an outboard before we start going for the whole boat.
Yeah, that's really good advice. We've talked about that kind of thing with a couple different people, and a lot of people have a different take from that. I think I really like that one where you're going with a Hyundai, so that way it's not like you're not going to lose everything on the first one, and if it doesn't go right, then at least you're only out $100, and now you can try it again and learn what you learned based on that first one and kind of build your pool up and build your like money up. And then so then you would kind of go into the John boat type of deal. Why would you go into like a John boat versus like straight into a 21-foot bass boat or something like that?
Great question. So with a little, a classic little aluminum John boat, very rarely are you going to encounter some of the massive, extremely expensive issues that you could with a bass boat. So
Mm.
a big problem with those bigger boats that have bigger horsepower engines is a lot of times the proper steps aren't taken by previous owners to use things like transom savers or things
Mm.
like that, and you might be able to get yourself in a really bad deal by accidentally buying a boat with like a busted or cracked transom. That would be no good at all. That's a huge repair, either a huge investment or a huge time commitment. Typically with those little, one piece aluminum boats, you're not going to encounter any issues like that. At the most, just the wood section, on the back of it might need replaced, $20-$30 worth of wood. But you're not going to be doing any major fiberglass refabrication or anything like that. So I'd say start small with a boat like that, where your chances of encountering those huge problems are definitely a lot less.
Yeah, yeah, kind of very wallet conscientious, I guess would be a good way to
Yes,
say that. That's funny.
absolutely.
Yeah. Now, because I don't do a lot of in Florida, we like where I'm at, we don't have. I'm sure there are John boats and a lot of them, but I don't have a lot of experience with doing like aluminum boats and stuff like that. Like something that I would like to get would be a canoe. It kind of one of the next projects that I want to get into. But yeah, the aluminum I don't really have. So what happens if you find one where like the rivets are busted out on it or something like that? You're just looking at one piece. So there aren't really any seams in the boat at all.
That's correct. Yeah, that would be a great time to hop on Google and look up rivet repair. But I mean, repairing some busted rivets, I would say, is certainly easier than patching some big fiberglass, uh, holes and stuff like that. But of course, I'm up north, a lot of freshwater lakes, so I probably see a lot more aluminum boats than you.
Mm-hmm.
But people down south, maybe start with a smaller like bay boat, Carolina skiff, something with low horsepower on there and not a lot of weight on the back of the transom, or just keep it simple, right? More simple and small your first boat is, I think the more you're going to learn and the less of a chance you'll have of making a really bad financial decision.
Yeah, yeah, you're not as likely to lose your money. It's basically what you're trying to say
Exactly.
here.
It's important in my business not to lose your money.
That's too funny. All right, so then since you got a lot of those kinds of what would be, because I'm not going to know most of these brands, what would be your like go-to brands and stuff like that? Like, are there specific brands that you like or specific brands that you don't really like getting into because they have XYZ problem or something like that?
Yeah, I don't really personally have any boat brands that I stay away from. I have certain boat types that I stay away from, and I have certain outboard brands that I stay away from. For one, Force. So the outboard brand Force, I avoid them like the plague. They are quite difficult to find parts for. You just those kind of one-off product lines that companies like Mercury did and stuff. They unfortunately, they use their own parts in a lot of cases, and they were just so limited, and it's really hard to find any aftermarkets for them. So I stay away from Chrysler, Force Outboards, things of that nature. Like I said, all boat brands are on the table, but I don't buy any of the really like kind of outdated like fiberglass tri-hull boats or anything like that. I feel like the market for those is super slim. They're heavy, they're not fast, they're old. So yeah, I think all boat brands are a go as long as it's the type I'm looking for. I love aluminum boats as far as a favorite. I think maybe not for the saltwater people, but for the freshwater, aluminum boats are in huge demand where I'm at. Little bass trackers, sea nymph, aluminum boats, bow riders, things like that. It's just lighter. They're more affordable. They're lighter. They're faster. And again, I think they have less of a chance of having a huge issue with it, like a big crack in fiberglass or something like that. So
Yeah, they're easy to trailer and stuff like that. So then help us walk us through more of your process. So like if you're going to look for a boat, what's your process for finding like an undervalued boat? Is there certain stuff that you look for, or is there like a certain place you go, or like how do you find most of your boats?
yeah, great question. Most of my boats I get off of Facebook Marketplace. So I think most people that are into the buying and selling game and whatever niche that may be, Facebook Marketplace is at least where I'm at is number one right now in terms of buying, selling, boats, trucks, everything. So I'd say 95% of what I buy is on Facebook Marketplace. And the other 5%, I do still check Craigslist. I got an app called OfferUp that
Oh
every now
yeah.
and then I see something on there. So, but maybe 5% of all the other options combined, 95% marketplace. But yeah, I it's funny. I recently just made a video about this that I posted on my channel, but there's a lot of ways, a lot of things I do, to find cheap boats and most importantly, find them quickly. Facebook Marketplace, they've got a feature where you can type in keywords and get alerts sent to your phone.
Oh,
So anytime
okay.
someone posts something, with the word boat, outboard, Johnson Evinrude, all those keywords or anything like that, I'm getting a notification from Facebook, and hopefully one of the first ones to see the ad. So if it's something I like, I can get in there quick.
Nice. I see you didn't put in words like project, trash, force. So, yeah.
Yeah, no force on my. I don't want to see them. Someone else come buy them.
That's too funny. That's too funny.
Yeah.
So now, do you, for the most part, do you like just one from the ads and stuff like that? Do you pretty much already have an idea that like you're going to be able to do something with the boat before you even go there, or do you find you kind of go and check out a lot of boats, but then like walk away from them, or like is it pretty 50-50, or what's that ratio look like?
I'd say the majority of the time, if I travel to see an item, I'm walking away with it.
Oh,
I like to, I think, only on rare circumstances do I find out that the seller was either not being truthful about what they had
mm,
or something along those lines. I like really only in the maybe the past 2 years, I can recall only one incident where I traveled to see a boat and there ended up being a big crack in the transom,
mm.
as we talked about earlier. And I didn't want any part of that, so I walked. But most of the time, I get a pretty good sense that I'm going to be able to make money on it. I get a decent sense for what's wrong. There's always going to be things that pop up that cost more money that you're gonna not know up front. So leave room for that in the budget. But most of the time, I ask all my questions up front and be patient. And if they answer all the questions and I like the answers, then I'm there, and I usually buy it.
Yeah, that's probably a way better why Facebook, well, why Craigslist kind of isn't really that much of a thing anymore, because you kind of get away from a lot of the scammy type stuff, because you can kind of, like you said, judge the profile based on the questions. Like you can kind of talk to the seller and be like, hey, what's going on with the boat? Get a backstory to it, like, oh, they've had the boat for 20 years. It was my dad's boat, or whatever the story may be, and then you're able to kind of draw an idea of what the situation really is with the boat, opposed to how far do you drive to get your boats? Are they pretty close, or like do you have to drive, an hour or so sometimes, or like what's that look
Depends
like?
on the deal.
Depends
It
on the
depends on
deal.
the deal. That's a great question. Obviously, gas costs money, wear and tear on your vehicle
Yeah.
costs money. Really, for big bass boats that I do, I really want to, because those usually involve some time and effort. I
Mm-hmm.
definitely want to walk away, with like a couple $1,000s. However, I may get to that number because that's usually what it's going to cost, for me to feel like my labor was, properly compensated. So if I think I can get a boat where, I'm going to make about that much profit on it, I'll drive. I'll probably drive 2.5 hours for it if I had to, maybe 2 hours one way. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any deal out there that I would go more than 3 hours for. So most of my stuff, I'd say the vast majority of what I do is less than an hour and a half in that like 30 minute
Mm-hmm.
to an hour and a half range. But the small outboard flips that you'll see on my channel, stuff like that, I don't like driving more than 45 minutes for those. Obviously,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
don't make as much. So I'd say the greater profit potential, the greater I'll travel, the greater distance I will go. So nothing's off limits for me as long as the deal's right.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. What I guess with the John boat, something else that was just thinking about while you're talking is that you're also saving a lot because you're doing a lot of cleanup, but like the electrical system's really basic. You don't have a bunch of lights and stereos and speakers and like all this other stuff that really like tax on to the expense where what most of the electrical systems in the John boat are what just basically your nav lights and a bilge pump and a float switch or
Yeah, the John boats are super affordable to do. Like you said, maybe a speaker if I'm getting crazy, a little radio or something.
yeah.
Nav lights, of course. Other than that, maybe just like some basic lighting if I go there. But I wouldn't even say I do that on the vast majority of them.
Mm,
As long as your nav lights are on, trailer lights are good. Obviously, got to have good trailer lights. Yeah, other than that, the John boats are super simple. Things obviously, advance from there as you start getting into bow riders and bass boats and things that have gauges and fish finders and all that fun
mm-hmm.
stuff. But for the John boats, those are very little electronic work involved, I'd say.
Right, right, which is going
So
to
very
keep
fun.
your costs down and also
Exactly.
the labor too, the labor of doing all that would
Yeah, because it takes a while
yeah.
to do it right.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm with you on that one. Now I'm thinking about the engines. Do Are you able to save most of the engines, or do you find yourself doing a lot of like engine swaps, like buying a two or three used ones and like having some running ones, and you're taking your used outboards that you were gonna flip or whatever, and then using them for a boat, or is it pretty much you like to buy them with an engine that you can get running?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I would say the latter is what I opt for most of the time. I've done some engine swaps in the past, but the equipment you need an engine hoist. You need somewhere to put that engine hoist. I'd say my current living situation isn't the most optimal, for that kind of equipment. So right now, and it's a big pain. Typically, when I'm buying big outboards, I buy one. I'm compression testing these engines before I buy them. So you know, as long as an engine has compression, I can fix it, right? Uh, that's always what I live by. I don't buy blown engines with plans to swap them. I've never done that actually. Like I said, a few years ago, I've done a couple swaps, but it was for different reasons. So I don't get into boats, with the intention of putting different engines on them. No, I like to buy the boat with the engine and keep everything there, get it running great as is.
Yeah, that's really good advice because I mean that's the expensive the engine's probably just as expensive as it is to get the boat and the trailer, than to try and do the swap because a lot of them you're not really dealing with remote controls or stuff like that. A lot of it's all tiller stuff, so
Yeah,
also saving you.
yeah, for the smaller boats for sure. Yeah, once you get into bass boats and those bigger boats, those definitely have a lot of cables and controls involved. But we do a little bit of everything.
So if you had let's dream for a little bit, right? If you had say a 20,000 square foot warehouse with a forklift and hoist and all that, would you start working on forces, or is that just still not in
No,
no, he's like, no.
no, no.
Uh,
Force, game fisher, off limits. I don't want any part of them. Had too many bad experiences. I'll I'll stick to the bigger brands with good part availability.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just messing with you. Now,
No, I know.
if you so you're not into the damage stuff, you're not really buying blown up engines and trying to do something. You're mainly looking for stuff that needs a coil or stator or something simple on the outboard that you can fix. Do you find yourself doing a lot of negotiating with sellers, or for the most part you do come pretty close to their asking price, or is there quite a bit of negotiation that you do when you're acquiring one of your boats?
Yeah, there's usually quite a bit of negotiation involved. A lot of people, like to throw out low balls and just, scroll through and just toss out low ball offers to people. And I don't do
Hmm.
that. I don't think that's a good look for anyone.
Yeah.
I typically will start by finding a listing that I believe is already undervalued to start. Um,
Um.
and then typically I like when they list it for a price that's already undervalued, and then I'll go check it out in person. And I guess my strategy from there, as most people do when they're buying something, is you fully inspect it, and of course the buyer is always going to point out things that are wrong, you know, or need fixed, right? It's just how deals work. I'm always going to point out things that I'm going to have to replace, but
Hmm.
I do it in a way, of course, always respectful of the seller, respectful of the seller's property. I do it in a way like I know how much most repairs are going to cost. And I'll say, okay, we both agree, the tires are dry rotted. I'm going to
Right.
need to spend $250 on tires. And I work that into my calculation, right? So, if they're asking X amount, I'll say, okay, well, this is how much I have to spend, to get it operational, get it legal. Would you do this amount? And I think doing that, not only it presents logic to the seller, like that makes sense, right? He needs this much off so he can get it
Hmm.
running for this amount. But also, it creates a respectful tone to the seller, where you're not like, this boat's a piece of crap. I'll take it off your hands for this much, right?
Yeah,
No one
like,
wants that. So keeping it respectful, but also logical, and why I am, offering something that's not, or that's lower than their asking price, I'd say.
yeah, you're not there just disrespecting their boat like
No.
this. Yeah, come on, no one wants your. I mean, like really, like yeah,
Yeah. Like, really? You think someone's gonna buy this? I'll
yeah.
take it off your hands.
That's funny. You're not there trying to get the boat for free, like trying to beat
No,
it down
no.
to get the boat for free.
As
Uh,
close to it as possible, but not free.
that, that's funny. That's funny. I think yeah, I'm the same way. I kind of like that tactic too, and it's also nice. How how many boats have you? Would you say you've done in the like last year or two?
Last couple of years, I'd say in the last 2 years, because I do a lot. I do a balance between flipping boats, and then also, I buy a ton of outboards to work
Mm.
on and flip. So I do a little bit of each, but just boats strictly, I'd probably say in the past 2 years, probably 10,
Oh
um,
wow.
10-ish. So, and of course, living in Ohio, it's hard to do that kind of work in the winter. So got one
Yeah.
in the driveway right now that, as soon as the snow melts, it's gonna have all my attention. So
Yeah, you're kind of like
yeah.
looking outside, like not today, not not
Yeah, yeah,
today.
no, we had a huge cold front too. It's been like -5 the past week. I'm like, not going out there today. Maybe
That's
tomorrow.
funny. Yeah, but I think where I was going with that question was that like when you go to negotiate, because you've got that like kind of tying it back to our where we started somewhere in the start of this conversation is that you're like starting with the one outboard for $100 and then like working your way up there and you're like getting your reps in of like doing the boat. So like if
Yeah,
someone wanted to like start flipping stuff, like that way someone doesn't look at you and be like, oh, that's he's just flipping boats like this and this and this. You've kind of got yourself into a system because you've done after 10, you kind of get like, oh, the bilge pump that cost me 125. The tires,
Exactly.
that's 250 bucks. Oh, the leaf springs, that's 100 bucks. Yeah, it's
Yep.
kind of like the meme. You're like, well, wait, what's broke on your boat? That's 1,000 bucks. Well, what's that? That's
Yeah,
1,000 bucks.
everything.
The tires, that's 1,000 bucks. It's like
Yep,
everything's
every
1,000.
time.
But you kind of like have that idea. So when you go there, you're kind of like, it's not even really that you're freeballing it, but you're like talking to the seller and you're like, well, I do need to fix this, this, and this, and that does cost. I look, it's just to get the boat out of here. Someone's gonna have to put tires on here, and I got $250 in tires, so we got to jack this thing up, put tires on it, and
Exactly.
you can kind of like have those numbers. So it is totally respectful to the seller because he's sitting there going, well, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, well, you're right. The bilge pump did catch on fire last summer, so
It
like,
did.
I guess you will need that, won't you? Yeah.
It will. And there's also been times where, I've sat with the seller and, he'll tell me whatever part it may be, the stator's bad. And
Mm-hmm.
well, that brings up a different point, right? The seller seems to always know exactly what's wrong.
But hasn't fixed
And
it yet. He ain't fixed it
many
yet.
of times they're not exactly correct in their assumption. However, but a lot of times they'll say, this intricate part, I've had it diagnosed by a shop. I don't want to pay to get it fixed. And a lot of times what I'll do is, we'll look up the part number together in person because I know how much a starter costs. I know how much a fuel pump costs. I know how much all that stuff costs. But sometimes, depending on the engine model, the year, some of those more intricate, like a stator or your timer base, rectifier, weird things like that, sometimes can be really expensive or really cheap. So, I've looked plenty of parts up right there with the seller and been like, okay, it's going to cost me this much. We're both here looking at it. Will you do this for a purchase price? So I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. And it's not like you came in there with the intention of buying it for this price. Like again, there's some logic behind why I'm asking to buy it for that because we both just saw how much this costs. So I've done
Yeah,
that.
yeah. And you already know because you told me that part, like the engine's not running. We can't go mess around with it because
Exactly.
of this. So yeah, that's a really good one. Do you, do you find that a lot of the boats that you do are more on the restoration side or more on the like you kind of just need to clean them up a little bit and then they're most of them are good to go. Which one do you kind of like find the most
Yeah.
of?
So I've said this before on my channel. I don't consider myself a restoration channel. I don't think I am in the restoration business. And what I mean by that is, so I don't buy boats, with huge structural damage. Like if it needs a new transom, I don't buy that. If it's got a blown engine, I don't buy that. But that's probably, other than maybe a couple other things, that's really my only limitations. I don't shy away from putting a new floor in a boat. Wood, new carpet. I'll do that. I've done that. You know, However, for the most part, I don't do any major like refabrications. I'd say, in a perfect world, what I really, really look for, and it happens so often, is that people let their engines sit for years. They never winterize them. Carburetors get gummed up. Maybe they backed into their trailer light with a lawnmower. They popped a tire. And it's just to them, it's all these things are stacking up, and it's not worth it for them to fix it. But someone like me going in there, I can usually knock all those things out pretty affordably. So yeah, anything wrong with the engine that's not actually internal, there's no scored cylinders or no busted pistons or anything like that. I can fix anything on the engine. No spark, no problem. We'll take care of that. We'll get everything cleaned up. But yeah, for me, the biggest thing is that I need to get the boat safe, legal. It needs to be, I need to get it legal for them, all the paperwork for someone to come purchase it, right? Not doing anything sketchy. It needs to be safe, right? Grease on the wheel bearings in the trailer, new tires if I have to, good working trailer lights, no leaks in the boat. Once it's safe, of course, I a lot of times will buy new seats. I'll install new seats in a boat. I typically don't often do full like carpet replacements. I do if it's really bad, but most of the time I like to just really get in there with some elbow grease and some soap and get it looking as best as I can. Um, and yeah, I like I said, I'm not doing full restorations every time. I'm getting these boats, safe, usable, reliable, and then making them have curb appeal, right? So not quite a full restoration, but they look good at the ramp. They look good on the water. Definitely has curb appeal, and yeah, I'd say that's what I do.
Yeah, I think that's like the sweet spot of finding like a boat. Well, even on getting kind of like a deal on a boat, even if you're not really looking to flip boats, like what we're talking about flipping boats, but finding that one where like someone, well, because it's an outboard, as long as they trim the engine down, all the water's leaked out, so it's not like you're dealing with say an inboard where you got a cracked block or something like that because it didn't get winterized. Where the outboard, yeah, you got to pull the carburetors off and clean the carburetors, or you might have to take the VST apart and change out a fuel pump or something like that. But like you said, this is something where you get the boat for this decent price. And now, within a few days, you've got, maybe 1, 2, 3 days in getting the engine going, pressure washing the carpet and kind of like cleaning it all up. And now all of a sudden, boom, like you're, you're smooth sailing. So
Exactly, and I see it so often is you know people will, like you said, the carbs will get gummed up, and it's an hour job depending on the size of the engine. You know, at most, typically. Maybe those bigger engines with multiple carburetors, a couple few hours, but at most, it's not a big job, and it's so common on carbureted engines. And people go back out, their engine doesn't run well, or it doesn't start at all, and they just give up. It's they're busy, it's not worth their time, and they sell it as a non-running engine when in reality it just needs a little bit of cleaning, little bit of maintenance, and then people don't wash their boats before they list it. They list it full of trees and or leaves and dirt, and people just they just list dirty boats. And there's been
yeah.
plenty of times that I've brought a brought a boat home, power washed it, vacuumed it, cleaned it up, and made a big profit on it, and never even touched the engine.
Wow.
So
Yeah, like show up
it's
and he's got like a tomato plant growing in the front of the
yeah,
boat. You're
I've
like,
seen it.
you want to
I've
keep
seen
that
it,
or
yeah.
like
Exactly. You name it, I've seen it doing this, man.
that's too funny. Then then what would you say would be the like most challenging part of it? So it sounds kind of like, well, I don't know, what would be the most challenging part of the process, from the purchasing to the cleaning up and fixing to the selling? Is it, which phase would you find to be the most challenging?
Yes, that is a wonderful question. And I'm going to say the purchasing stage is the
Really?
most challenging. Yeah. So, and the reason I say that is, like I said, when I purchase a boat, I make sure it checks my boxes, which are no huge structural damage. Besides the floor, we can do a floor. And also, we have good compression on the engine. If I get those two, you know, I can fix anything that I need to fix, right? I have enough experience where I can fix the issues. So I wouldn't say for me personally that the fixing stage is the most challenging. And also after the fixing stage, when you have a boat that it's good, it inside and out, it runs great, it's really easy to sell a boat that runs really well, when you have a boat that you've done good work on, you're very excited to show this to a seller or to a buyer. You run it in front of them, no concerns of it starting or not running well, because you've done the work. At that point, it's just being a good salesman, and giving them the rundown on the boat, and someone will eventually buy it. But the purchasing stage, all the money, and I'm about to drop some, this is some crazy wisdom here, but for me, all the money you make during a flip comes when you buy the boat. So, and what I mean by that is it's not that you get into a boat and you make these amazing upgrades to it and then sell it for way more. It's that you get into it way below market value, and then you bring it up to market value. and that's where the money's made. And you know, finding those deals where you just get into something very cheap, and it fits your requirements, and you and are in it, and they're able to be worked on and fixed. That can be challenging. So finding those deals, I'd say, is the hardest part. I am picky in the deals I take on. So once you get them, fix them up and sell them, no big deal. But finding the right deal, getting into it at a good price where I'm sure I will not lose money on it. Um, I'd say that's the toughest part. But when you get in the deal, you're already pretty certain, that you're going to come out on top of it.
Right, because all your money's in the buy. That's a really
Yeah,
good point, and you don't have any emotional attachment to it. So you
yeah,
really, like you said, you kind of like if you're already negotiating or like looking at buying something, that already means that like it's already, like you said, it checks all your boxes. Because that was something else that I was going to ask you is I was going to say, like, do you have any kind of strategies to unload the boat? Like, if you don't, but it sounds like same thing. If you buy it undervalued, once you get it clean, a
yeah.
clean working boat, like people just buy them up. You have no trouble.
100%. And that's what I always strive for is I want to get into a deal where I know that even if I found something catastrophically wrong with it after I got it home, which that's never happened to me, thank goodness, but in the event that it did, I want to get into a deal at a price where I could be like, okay, this whole project, scrap it. I'm going to list it tonight and I know I'll be able to get my money back from it because I got into it that cheap. So that's my goal is I want to be able to take something home, power wash it, and even if it's not running, even if it's not running, things still have a value. And I want to make sure I'm getting into something cheap enough to where if I decide to just scrap the whole project and offload it immediately, I would still, at the minimum, get my money back, plus gas money and the money for the
Mm-hmm.
Twix bar at Speedway I bought on the way. But yeah, that's the strategy.
That's good. I mean, that's a good way. That's great for somebody that's like thinking about doing something like that because
Yeah.
um yeah, so then there's no what are like the common things that people ask since you know everything about the boat. I guess whenever people are buying, they don't really, I guess, do they have a lot of common questions, or is it basically just like, oh, this boat's really clean and they come and buy it?
Obviously it starts with them seeing my ad and saying, wow, this boat's clean. And I always make sure I have really good photos. I take photos of everything. I have a very detailed description. Yeah, and people will always have questions about the boat and what works, what doesn't, any type of stuff like that. But honestly, the most common question I get, and it's the hardest to defend for people in my industry, is how long have you owned it? So, very common question people buying anything, ask anything that involves engines, I'd say. How long have you owned it? And, for someone, maybe sometimes it's a week, 2 weeks, maybe only a couple months. All of those are not really a good look to a buyer, right? Uh, Typically, when people buy things, you want to be buying from someone that's owned it for years and can attest to all of the the engine's reliability and all that type of stuff. So that one is I probably get asked that 90% of the from 90% of the buyers that come look at my stuff. And the counter to that is I don't lie to them. I say I've been doing this for X amount of years. I buy these boats. I go through the entire engine, which I do. You watch my channel. I'm servicing the impeller, new gear oil, new spark plugs, compression testing. Um, I'm taking these boats out on water tests. I'm doing multiple water tests, and that's just what I tell them. Like I you feel free to browse my Facebook profile. Right, people can rate you on Facebook Marketplace if anyone didn't know that. So I have a very good rating, and people have left me lots of good reviews, which is good ammo for me to counter that type of question. Right, like yes. I have not owned this boat. I bought it. These were the things that were wrong with it. this is what I've done to the engine to fix those. And, now I've taken it on these water tests. I have all the confidence in this boat and go from there. And typically, they appreciate the honesty, they appreciate the breakdown of what all you fixed on the engine, that type of stuff. So it actually, I found that while they're nervous at first hearing that, after I, give my little explanation that, I've been doing this a long time and I do good work, they actually feel better about it, knowing that someone that, knows these engines, has gone through it, has tested and fixed, what needs to be tested and fixed, instead of some random guy.
Have you ever had somebody like, since it's a used engine and stuff like that, like I'm sure there's been one where you sold a boat and then there was something wrong. Do you find that, how do you handle that situation? Pretty, is it usually always something really basic or like,
So actually, only twice have I, in all my years of doing this, have I gotten someone being like, "Hey, what you sold me, it's not right." The first time was because I sold a gentleman a two-stroke outboard, and he was not adding any oil to his fuel. His engine blew up on him, and you know, so when I asked if he had any questions about two strokes or anything, and he was like, "No," obviously he didn't quite know what he was purchasing. So, maybe that's not my fault. From that day, I've always told people, hey, it's a two stroke. If you weren't aware, I don't want to insult your intelligence if what that is, but you got to add oil to the fuel, got to run it 50 to 1 or whatever that engine requires.
mm-hmm.
So that was the first one. The second time, actually, it was just something really simple. Uh, some sort of, I think when he put the engine in the back of his truck, his low speed idle mixture screw kind of got bumped around or something, and yeah, when he told me that it wasn't running right, I ran it for him. It ran great. He got home. I jumped on a phone call with him. We went through like a full kind of diagnostic. Okay, well, is this working right? Is this working right? And then we got it figured out. So yeah, if someone buys something from me that it was in good running condition and all of a sudden it's not, uh, you know, within a day or two of purchasing it, then of course, I'm going to do everything I can to help them get that going again. But if someone reaches out to me, after playing with it all summer and then says, "Hey, engine you sold me isn't working great," I'm probably going to in the most respectful way possible, tell them to kick rocks, or we can you can pay for some service or something like that. But
Yeah, you could do
can't give people
something
too much leeway.
different with it. I think yeah, it's kind of like, at the end of the summer, all of a sudden, after 200 hours, it's not peeing anymore. You're like, well, you put 200 hours,
Well,
like,
you know, yeah, that's like taking your Honda back to the dealership because it needs an oil change, right? And
yeah,
you're
yeah,
trying to
yeah,
return the car. So,
yeah. I got 20,000 miles on the car, but
yeah, exactly.
uh,
You get it.
so this is more of a business to you than it is a passion project, because I didn't know where exactly that you were doing this when you both in this kind of, so it's kind of, you're really turning it into a business. Is that kind of what you're, where it's going?
Yeah, I'd say it's both for sure. I very much enjoy like problem solving in general. So, diagnosing issues on engines, I think it's fun, right? Now, just because I think it's fun doesn't mean that I don't throw the wrench across the room and get upset because something's not fitting in like it's supposed to. It's frustrating, but I do see it as a passion project. I love uh, there's something very rewarding about a boat that hasn't seen water in 20, sometimes 20 years, and for me to be the one that kind of brings it back to life and sells it to a family that's going to get a ton of use out of it. That's something that feels really good. I love doing it, and of course, whenever I buy these boats, I get to play with them and take them out a couple times while I'm testing my work. So that's very fun. Who doesn't love being on the water on a boat? It's the greatest thing in the world. So yeah, it is a business to me. The finances, are always going to come first. I'm not someone that's, like I said, I'm not sinking thousands into full restorations that I'm never going to make money on just because I'm passionate about restoring a certain boat. Making money is always the top priority, but I am very passionate about the work and I really enjoy what I do.
That's awesome. That's awesome because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that would, I mean, that's why places like MMI and UTI and all these other places exist is because there's so many people out there that really enjoy. I mean, that's kind of how I got into everything. But like, if you enjoy the water, you enjoy the boats, you like problem solving, it's kind of like trying to find a way. How do you start a side gig and then turn your side gig to your main gig and then like actually enjoy what you do? Like you said, it's not always, just
Yeah,
roses. I mean, there's obviously
agreed.
you stay away from the Forces and the Chryslers, but still, even when you get some of the Yamahas, it's still like, wait a minute, my hand doesn't fit in there. Like, what? Like, why would you do this? Why
Exactly.
did How come I have to take that many things? I have to take 40 bolts out just to change a
Oh,
fuel filter? Like, like,
don't even get
but
me started.
outside of those things, that's kind of like, yeah, you actually enjoy what you do and you're able to make money to, live a lifestyle that's a lot more enjoyable than getting up and going, to a 9 to 5. So that's awesome. I think there's a lot of people out there that would really like to do that and that kind of, buy the small engine and then get into these types of boats. Um, that's definitely what a lot of people would like to do.
Yeah, no, and I actually do still have a 9 to 5, so I am quite busy. This is still, all of these engine and boat flips and repairs are being done between the hours of 5 to 9, or on weekends. Yeah, so I stay very busy. I have a very full schedule. Um, so yeah, that's where we're at right now. But who knows what could happen in the future. So
Hmm. Yeah, but that's kind of how there's always a grinding phase when you start, the
exactly,
side
yeah.
gig to the main gig. That's a big gap, and a lot of people never make the gap,
Exactly,
to
yeah.
finally get over. But I think what
But
you're saying is gonna help lead a lot of people to, find that encouragement to know, okay, yeah, if I grind it out for a few years, then you'll be able to eventually make the flip.
right, and for sure, and some people just like the security that comes with a regular 9 to 5 job. You get health insurance, all that type of stuff, and other people are just go go go. I'm gonna go to get it done, and I honestly have no doubt that I probably could I could sustain myself full time just doing this, the boat stuff that I'm doing right now, if I put full time hours into it, which I don't right now. So but if I
Hmm.
dedicated, if that was the only option and I went for it, I'm sure it would work out. But as of right now, I definitely like the balance between good corporate work, 9 to 5, and then my passion projects and that in the afternoons and on the weekends. So it's a good balance for me.
Yeah. How do you find the seasonality to it in Ohio is basically during the wintertime? Because you just said you've got a boat right in in your yard right now that you're, in the process of doing. How is there really, that slow of an off season to where could you buy and sell and flip the boats all year round, or would there definitely be a from December to March, no one's buying boats?
Yeah, great question. It So at least in Ohio, for the past few years, we've had pretty mild winters overall. So maybe mid 30s really, like for as far as for a few weeks at a time. But we've seen a lot of like 40s, stuff like that. It's been mild. This winter, as in a couple weeks ago, was the coldest we've had in I think like 100 years or something crazy like that in Ohio. Yeah, it got really cold. So no, I'm not doing anything. No one's buying anything. No one's driving anywhere during that time. But for the most part, It does extend year round. However, the prices people are willing to pay for a bass boat, like, you know, as soon as we start seeing, 60 degrees outside versus in the middle of winter are different. So it really depends. Like, I've got some stuff that I have worked on, I fixed up, and I'm just keeping in storage until the weather warms up. Because, right before fishing season, bass are spawning. That's when I'm getting max amount of return on these projects. But if I wanted to, the market's still active. People are still like the boat I told you I had in the driveway. I bought that on New Year's Day, you know, in the first, right in the beginning of January. So yeah, it's active. People are buying and selling, but you're not going to get that top dollar that I like to get on these deals this time of year.
Do you find that the buying is better during since people are probably willing to take a lot less too? Because so it's almost like you might even, if you had the space, if you had space, you could really almost like stack up a couple, like, if you can find the deals and like have, oh, I got, three or four, stacked up, and then you could just fix them or whatever. And then come season, boom, you have a good turn.
Absolutely, yeah. Winter's a great time for finding deals. Especially, people are selling, they're selling old boats, they're selling stuff in the garage, old outboard engines, whether that be for Christmas money. A lot of people are taking vacations in the winter. A lot of people need to pay taxes, stuff like that. That all happens this time of year, so it's a great time for people, to try and sell this type of stuff. And the other thing that's good about it is that the market of buyers is not that big in the winter, right? No one wants to buy a boat in the winter, right? It's cold out. Everyone's on their couch thinking there's no way, I'll think about that in April, right? I'll think about that in June. So, not only do you have people selling boats for cheaper than normal, but you also have a less amount of competition. So it's a great time to go get out there and buy some boats. And like you said, I do that. I do stack some boats in the winter. I got a storage lot that I keep them in until I'm ready to knock them out in the spring. So we're on it, and yeah, winter is a great time to get some good deals.
Now, I was trying to think what where to go from that, because I was wanting to ask a question about like your setup there, because you said you had a storage lot, and it threw me off because I was like, oh wow, you actually do have a place to store all these. So it's kind of like, I was wondering, like the setup, for somebody that wanted to like get into flipping, like tools that they need, and like, but you pretty much do a lot of it out of your driveway, and then I guess you got a storage lot. So it's kind of like, what kind of skills or tools would you say someone would need to do um a smaller flip like this?
Right. So just kind of come out and say it, like, this is something, the most important thing you need, right, is you need a little bit of room. You need a hose, right? Whether that be to fill up buckets or tanks of water, uh, for your engines on your boat, or to hook up the muffs, you need some sort of access to a hose. So a lot of people, if you're living in an apartment or something, you're gonna have a really hard time, doing that type of work. You need room to put a boat. I'm sure a lot of apartment complexes are not going to allow you, to just drop off your 23-foot bass tracker in the your nitro bass boat in their parking lot, in their shared common parking lot. So you do need a little bit of space. When I first started doing this, I started this, back when I lived with my parents, and they had, a nice little shop, little pole barn, and like a driveway where I could park a boat, which was great. So that was awesome, and that especially that they'd let me just bring these random boats into their driveway, which is great. And now I live in town. The town I live in town. Uh, I have a very small driveway, only room for, one boat at a time. I'm only 25 years old, so I am in this market. I'm very, thankful that I've had the opportunity to purchase my own home, and I eventually want to go somewhere where I've got more space, more land, more places to park boats, but it just wasn't feasible at the moment. But right now, even living in town, you can still do this. I also, I was looking for storage. So I actually, there's plenty of apps out there where like people in your area, some people own businesses and have, big empty parking lots that they don't use. And, I found a guy in my town. He owns a business and big gravel parking lot, fenced in with a gate code and everything, and I found him on this storage app and I was like, hey, like, can I park boats here? And he's like, yeah, like this much per month. You can keep your boats here. Here's a gate code, come in and out. So, it's a good deal that's worked out for me. And I know places like that are everywhere. So, you don't have to, I guess that's the lesson is you don't have to have, 10 acres and a huge, like you said, 5,000 square foot shop warehouse. I'm getting this done with an in town home, a very small driveway, and paying to store things at a different spot. So you can get it done. You just got to know where to look.
That's awesome. Which I think that's a lot of encouragement to a lot of other people too, because at 25, that's like you're still real young. So to have made it this far, doing the flipping with the side gig and then being able to do what you've done is really, really good. That's what that's what people want. Like that's the dream. Like that's the actual dream is that you're you're actually growing, you know what I'm saying? Like you're buying a house and all that stuff. Yeah, you're grinding it because you got a full-time job and the side gig, but at the same time, like it shows people that it's possible. You're in town, small driveway, little garage, like, like you can do that kind of stuff. And it just takes the courage to just start with that one. So I think your advice was spot on with telling people to, go buy a little 2.5 horse or a 6 horse, or probably not two and a half. 2.5s probably don't have the same value as like, if you can get a good deal on like, a 4, a 6, an 8, like 9.9, something like that. Like, don't spend too much money, but you can kind of get your feet wet and see if the flipping business is really for you or not,
Yeah, you got it for sure. And those 6 horsepower 99s, once you learn the basics of those, those lessons apply to 150 horse, 200 horse, right?
Yep.
It's just instead of one carburetor, there's three or four or, whatever it may be. You learn the basics of how to diagnose problems on engines that small and all of that translates up the line, with the addition of some little more parts, but in the end, diagnosing and working on stuff still the same, no matter what the horsepower is. So very easy way to learn on those little ones.
For sure, for sure. Well, Chris, this has been great. I really appreciate you coming on. Anybody that wants to go check them out, check them out. Boat Busters on YouTube. And other than that, you guys have a great day.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.